one person on their own can achieve quite a lot, but 20 people who are aligned together can really change the world. We have 5 hack houses in Oxford, all very close to each other, and we make them exclusively for people who are building companies in crypto or who want to build companies in crypto.
The rate of ideation is obviously much faster, and then you can figure out problems together much quicker as well. And then the knowledge also accumulates into, it becomes this sort of collective consciousness of knowledge. Everybody is just sharing all these things that they're learning.
You have just heard from Josh Lavorini, co-founder of HomeDAO, and out.eth, HomeDAO member. HomeDAO is the foundation of a network of technology entrepreneurs who live and build together. They have 5 hacker houses in Oxford and equip founders with all the resources necessary to make visions become reality. So let us dive right in.
All right, gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
And the reason we're here is you're just back from Tokyo and you've won it again. Okay.
Yeah, that's the 7th one, yeah.
Boring, this winning thing?
Not yet, not yet.
When I saw that, and it was actually the first note that Josh sent me through Telegram, was like, oh, we're a group of hackers in houses, and we've got quite a few backers, which we're going to talk about as well. And we've won these hackathons, 6 or 7. I had to think about, and I'm dating myself a bit, when LeBron James joined the Miami Heat and they had this welcome show in the arena.
But we also know you 3 kings came down here to win championships. Not 1, championships.
Not 2.
LeBron, tell us about that.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7.
And it seems like that's pretty dominant. So what's your motivation there going to all these hackathons and smacking everybody?
One of the best things about going to hackathons is getting to meet so many interesting people all in one place together. The cool thing about crypto, given that it's remote first, is that you have higher attendance for these IRL meetups. And also when you win the hackathon, create a product in such a short period of time that can then become a company, or that can then go on to actually raise money and take a life of its own. So yes, it's really exciting just to get validation and really quick iteration on whatever it is that you're building.
It's definitely not about going there and just winning. It's about going there and you have this massive concentration of talent of all the really young builders, like whatever age, really great, just come and then meet all in real life and then hack for 24 hours, just going full tilt. And at the end, some pretty amazing things can come out. So yeah, there's something really electric about being around all of these great people just building as hard as they can in this short period of time.
Actually, a few times on DAO Tokyo as well, which was the conference running parallel with ETHGlobal. Quite a few people who participated there mentioned that the hackathon is great because you can actually, in such a compressed time, create a prototype that evolves into something tangible and that can be funded 3 months later or so. Have you had results of your hackathon commercialized in that way or become real products or protocols?
Almost a year ago now, or about 8 months ago, my co-founder and I, we weren't originally working together, but there was a hackathon when I'd come to Oxford and he had pitched me on this idea and we were talking for an NFT AMM. We ended up talking about it for a couple of days and then we saw that there was a hackathon that was going on and we just said, screw it, why not? Let's just go full tilt, we'll drop everything and then just enter this hackathon. And what ended up happening is that the project that we submitted into that hackathon ended up winning, but also more importantly, we ended up pivoting entirely to focus on this thing that we had submitted. It was really quite great.
And in Tokyo, this was the wallet score, right?
Yeah, so Tanuki is the most recent project that we're probably going to take full time. We're not sure who's going to take it yet because everyone's so busy. No one knows who wants to pivot onto it yet. But that's the cool thing. There are so many people in HomeDAO that someone will take it up at some point. So many people who want to build and who are currently building. Tanuki is a wallet scoring protocol that allows for a safe, fair and transparent way to evaluate people's social credit effectively. So as opposed to the traditional way of measuring people's creditworthiness or people's social standing, which can be based on unfair things such as race or gender or class or whatever it might be, and that's often opaque, so you don't even know what it's based on. This is a way to evaluate people's on-chain activity so that they can then have products specifically tailored to them. So if you are a really creditworthy person, you've done loads of volume, let's say, through your wallet, or you've always been interacting with good wallets, i.e. not associated with money laundering or criminals or anything like that, then perhaps your credit rating on Aave should reflect that, and you should get a better APY or perhaps a lower collateral ratio. So instead of 150% collateral for an over-collateralized loan, you might put 140%. And this can also be used for Web3 social, for example, to reduce the frequency of bots on projects like Lens, or for trading platforms that want to offer specific discounts for people who put lots of volume through their exchanges, or for whales. There are lots of different potential applications, and we use zero-knowledge proofs to make sure that the data is stored safely. So that's the most recent project. But another example that we might look at in terms of a speculative project that's now taken a life of its own would be Rhinestone. Conrad's a member of HomeDAO, and his team, also from HomeDAO, won ETH Denver. They got the main prize at ETH Denver a few months ago for a project called Rhinestone. And Rhinestone is basically a modular account abstraction tool. If you want to create a wallet with really specific features, a retirement function where 5% of your money every year goes into a retirement wallet, or a dead man's switch where if there's no activity on your wallet for a certain amount of time, it then goes to your children, or a sessions key wallet, so that you can, session keys or elements, so you can interact with GameFi much more easily, etc., etc. All these different things, you can just drag and drop them into your wallet, either during your wallet's existence or beforehand. So it's a really cool way for both developers and users to benefit from account abstraction and the innovations going on there. Conrad's now working full-time on that and raising money with his co-founder for it.
Excellent. I think you gave some hints about how HomeDAO works at different teams, but maybe take some time to explain the structure that you're operating under.
Yeah, for sure. Probably the best way to go about this is two ways. One is me giving a sort of high-level overview, and then the other would be to talk about his actual lived experience, quite literally, in HomeDAO. The motivation for HomeDAO was really about the benefits of immersion and going full tilt. Mr. Beast, for example, is a great example of this, where he is now, obviously, to people who are our generation, he's quite famous. He's one of the most successful YouTubers ever, if not the most successful YouTuber ever. He's about 24 years old now and is already a billionaire. He's done an incredible amount of work for such a young person and has been, it seems almost like inevitably successful when you look at his commitment. But what he credits most of his success to is the peer group that he had at the very start of his journey. So he would get up at 7 a.m. and from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., he would only be talking to 6 other YouTubers who were also trying to achieve the same things as him. And they would constantly reflect on what makes a good video, how to maintain engagement with your viewers, ways to grow your following, etc., etc. What works, what doesn't, how can they be more creative with things? And that really tight feedback loop, in the sense that not only are you learning yourself, but the people around you are learning, which then helps you to learn. And that compounds over time quite exponentially. That enabled them to grow at a rate that gave them an unfair advantage. So we thought, okay, this is clearly valuable. What if we applied this to founding a company or building something in crypto? So that's what we did. We got hacker houses. We have 5 hacker houses in Oxford, all very close to each other. And we make them exclusively for people who are building companies in crypto, or who want to build companies in crypto, people who are either founders or aspiring founders. And we then partnered with some very large and influential organizations like Consensus and a company called WebN Group, which is the incubator arm of Brevan Howard Digital. We partnered with Nickel Digital and another very large hedge fund in London. We partnered with Near Protocol, and this enabled our members to get both the sort of grassroots immersion in building the company, but then also interacting with the potential customers and the potential investors in those companies. We launched in November, and since then we've grown to 20 members, all in different houses, building all sorts of different things. We've won, like we said, every hackathon we've entered into, so that's 7 out of 7 now. And most of those projects have become real life projects. And we're just hoping to carry on building on the momentum that we've generated.
Yeah, I'll just add that in addition to being able to riff off everyone else who's also building companies, and the rate of ideation is obviously much faster, and then you can figure out problems together much quicker as well. And then the knowledge also accumulates into, it becomes this sort of collective consciousness of knowledge. Everybody is just sharing all these things that they're learning. I think in addition to that, just mentally, it's also a very nice environment. So if you're a solo founder, or if you're just 2 or 3 people founding a company, you often come across problems that are just seem insurmountable or very difficult. And there are very difficult situations that you can get into. And just being in an environment where everybody else is going through the same thing is just very comforting, to be able to lean on other people who have maybe gone through similar things or similar magnitudes of things, to be able to just be there and help you get through it, essentially, and figure out the problems together.
We're obviously operating on 2 dimensions. One is an incredibly high level of skill, and the second, by the sound of it, is an incredible high level of intensity. you need to find the people, and maybe there's the hackathon that helps being connected to the whole ecosystem. But ultimately, what in your mind qualifies somebody to become one of the 20 HomeDAO members? How would you select the next one that comes in?
I could give my take as a member, and then maybe Josh could give his take as the one who's running it all. I think Steve Jobs has a pretty good soundbite when he's asked about what makes a good team. And he said that really, if you can find 3 or 4 people who are really high quality, then the team manages itself and they become very selective of who they let into that team. They filter out the quality themselves. And as a community, if we have, which I think we do, 20 really high quality people who are all just working really hard and who are all very good in specific fields or have great talent, then when they go out into the world to all these conferences and they find someone who's very high quality, then they could get assimilated, if you will, or have the potential to get assimilated into our community as well. I wouldn't say we have some sort of strict criteria like a university or something. There are very intangible elements as well, like how aggressive you are just in execution, or how ambitious you are. Really just like how well you are with the general vibe of just building something and going full tilt, trying to build something and get it out into the world.
I completely agree, especially on the point of specific criteria. That's both one of the most interesting and the most difficult parts of this, is that it's not as though you can go to a recruiter and say, we're looking for someone with this experience or this CV. It's a lot more intangible. We do have some heuristics that we might operate by, the ambition that people have and the energy that they have in terms of how they go about achieving what they want to achieve. Also, to use probably the wrong term, but the vibe that people have is of course very important, and whether we'll get along with that person, because it's not just about having a team of superstar individuals, but rather having a team of aligned individuals that really makes a difference and that really causes us to benefit from HomeDAO.
When you look at the crypto scene, it's obviously crypto bros more than crypto cis. And so are you 20 guys?
No, we're not at all, actually. We do have female members. In fact, I live with one of our most impressive members, a girl called Jess, who's doing her PhD at the moment in quantum computing and also has won several hackathons. So we do have female members. There's also a girl called Elena, who is a really impressive girl. She did engineering at university and she's very much involved in crypto as well. Obviously, the industry does have a male bias, or perhaps it has a predominance of males, but we're open to people of all genders.
We probably have a higher percentage of female members than the general crypto community.
That's one benchmark to measure it by. Obviously, the ideal would be 50-50, but yeah, we definitely exceed the industry standard.
And because it's called HomeDAO, so is there a DAO behind it that helps you organize, or how does that side function?
We do intend to have much more tokenized versions of governance once we accumulate a significant amount of assets via our venture side of things and our venture DAO. But already most of what happens in HomeDAO is governed in a decentralized way, which is to say that whoever joins, they don't join based on one person giving them the yes. We really leverage the wisdom of the crowd by saying that everyone has to vote, and it's based on percentage votes and based on debates that we have within the community. So everyone knows that they have a stake in the success of the group, and therefore everyone takes ownership and wants to have a say in how things are run. That's really important to us, because one person on their own can achieve quite a lot, but 20 people who are aligned together can really change the world. We don't have an on-chain DAO per se at the moment, but we are moving towards that. And as a decentralized autonomous organization, we are, operating in the spirit of a DAO.
What's generally your view? I'll take this from the DAO Tokyo conference. That was clearly also very crypto heavy, not surprisingly, but there was nobody from the real world. So there wasn't a lawyer on a panel, right, to have a discussion around when you hit questions of liability and ownership and taxation, etc. How does this construct of a DAO ultimately translate into the real world? Japan's ruling party put out a Web3 white paper, and they actually addressed that point, which I found pretty interesting. See your thoughts around the real world and then transnational aspects of a DAO and so on. It's a very obvious question I think you probably get often.
It does touch on lots of different aspects, and from things like network states to actually interacting with real world actors and physical assets. It's a very interesting question. And I think there are some jurisdictions that are beginning to recognize DAOs as legal entities. And that's where you'll probably really start to see DAOs being able to interact with the real world, as it were. There are two interesting elements. One is whether they interact with the real world and how much that can accelerate. And then the other is the extent to which they can interact completely autonomously on chain without needing the real world. The main reason I think that they would need the real world at the moment would be for dispute resolution. When it ultimately comes to it, you want to have a court that can enforce this rule. If the state is a monopoly on violence, then you need a court to be able to arbitrate whether that violence should be exercised or not, and who should be the one that bears liability. And I was actually talking to a very distinguished professor about this recently. He's actually a professor of constitutional law, but he also writes a lot of software. And he was saying that one of the problems that you'll find is that in smart contracts that are self-executing, so that's why there's less likelihood of the need for arbitration in the first place, is that they're self-executing. But in those tail cases where there's a bug in the contract, or perhaps not even a tail case, it's actually quite common, but hopefully it pushes towards being a tail case. But even still, in those tail cases where there is a bug, the question isn't, is this bug there? The question is, why is it there? Was it there deliberately, or was it there by accident? And that alone is incredibly difficult to ascertain, but that can lead to very difficult questions in the courtroom. So there are some really important things that we'd have to overcome. I don't think they're insurmountable obstacles, but they are quite nuanced questions that will be very difficult to resolve, especially in a world where there's like a large disparity of technical understanding. Most lawyers don't actually know how to code. Most judges definitely don't. And then how many people who know how to code understand Solidity or Rust, et cetera, et cetera. So it will take quite a long time. And I'm pessimistic on the short term. On the medium and long term, I think it definitely will have an impact because there are some clear benefits from organizations being run on chain, or at least partly run on chain, in terms of the transparent allocation of resources, the granular control of permissions, that sort of thing.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a very long-winded overview, but I hope that touches on the different things, because there's also the very aggressive way that you'd frame a DAO, which is that we don't need a government at all. We don't need any third party to arbitrate between any of our activities. And there was Empire DAO in New York that I think really emphasized that. I remember going to visit them, and I was quite impressed with their sort of vigor in emphasizing this, but I'm not sure if it's likely to succeed.
I think it would be really quite impressive if we could have these DAOs fully on chain and like fully separate from the like trad world. But I think the reality is the trad world, or like TradFi, these trad institutions have been refined over the course of hundreds, or in some cases even thousands of years. And so they've really developed good processes around arbitration or different cases in financial sense, like creditworthiness, liquidations, these kind of things. Anything that requires some level of subjective human judgment, I think they've really refined that. And so it would be somewhat a waste to not integrate with all of those trad rails and institutions. Obviously, bridging across is extremely difficult, but yeah, I think if enough people work on it, which a lot of people are, then we'll eventually get there.
Leading from there, similar question, and maybe start with you, Outdot. It's this thematic of code is law, and should it be law? And what if you make a mistake in the smart contract and it's unchangeable, then you lose your money, and that is just how it works. What is your position on that?
The clean view is that, yes, code is law, and then you have a very concrete line of, and it's very unambiguous in black and white, whether something is bad or something is good. Like the reality is that the collateral damage, or just the damage in general from taking that view, is just, it's almost obscene. Like you have hundreds of millions, or I think maybe even billions of dollars in hacks in the past couple of years. And then to say that's all just waste and it's acceptable waste because code is law. So I don't think anybody can reasonably say that. I think code should definitely have a high degree of authority on how the system should operate. But in a case where it really is quite obvious that this is not how the system should operate and somebody's exploited it, then we should probably integrate with the trad rails, like I was saying, that have processes to sort the situation. It may be the case in a few years, or like 10 years maybe, somewhere far on the horizon, that we can move all of this arbitration and these trad rails on chain somehow. We are seeing it already. So we have these insurance projects which have these arbitration processes of figuring out whether something was a hack or not and how the proceeds should be distributed. But right now it's not the case. But yeah, the overarching theme, definitely, I don't think code is law. I think code should have a high degree of authority, but in a case where things really go bad, then you need to defer to human judgment.
I completely agree. Not much more to add apart from a general bullishness on DeFi insurance protocols, such as Ultrabity, which is being built in HomeDAO after ETHGlobal.
Let's talk a bit more about what you're working on. Maybe one or two examples each of things that are pretty hot for you.
I've been working on a project with another member in HomeDAO called Mo for an NFT AMM. And we've been working on that for about 8 months, like I said earlier. And the idea is that, if I zoom out a little bit, there's a very cool sector in crypto right now. It's very energetic and it's very exciting and it's very new. It's called NFT Finance. And it's a group of people that have come together and decided that the current state of NFT speculation and trading and financial tooling is just not sufficient. This small group of people have been working for about the past year, maybe year and a half, to build financial tools for NFTs. That includes things like lending, derivatives, perpetuals, insurance, basically all these financial tools, but for NFTs. And that's rapidly progressed over the past year and a half. The project that myself and Mo are working on is an NFT AMM. And the idea is that you have an AMM very similar to Uniswap or SushiSwap or Curve, where you can deposit your ETH and NFTs, and you have democratized liquidity provisioning, which makes a very healthy market for NFT trading overall, something that we think is much better than an order book, where there's a high technical barrier to entry to participate and provide liquidity. In an AMM, it's really just opens it up to everyone. So you have higher degrees of liquidity, but also more people participating and more fairness, essentially.
NFTs that you would be automated market making are art and music and whatever else it might represent?
It can really be anything, but obviously most of the trading volumes nowadays are done around profile pictures, which is a collection of 10,000 NFTs, if you're not familiar. And each of these NFTs is very similar to each other, but they have their own twists and own different traits. And then typically people will take these NFTs and set them as their profile picture. So that's where most of the volume is. But yes, for sure, like you could definitely add music NFTs or gaming NFTs or even real world asset NFTs into the AMM. It's very unopinionated in that way.
Well, the hackathon is very short, and you said people were working on it for a year and a half. You've been working on it for 8 months, and ultimately realizing the idea and getting it all as a solid product is still quite an effort.
Getting something to market, it's a huge effort every time. Our philosophy is really speed and security, second to security, of course, but really, speed, getting something shipped so that it can get out there as soon as possible. We can get feedback on iteration and improvement. So as soon as we had completed the hackathon, which took about a couple of days, we had a product live, or we had an MVP of the NFT AMM live. Within maybe 3 weeks, we had built the thing, built the UI, wrote the smart contracts, and got the audits all within the span of 3 weeks. It was a very aggressive push to get the thing launched. We did a very large lift, technical lift, to get the thing shipped. So we built the front end, the smart contracts, got the audit done within that span, and then launched it as soon as possible to start getting feedback from the community.
The projects in HomeDAO that I'm most bullish on, it's very hard to say because they're all in such different niches that you really do have to keep a really broad perspective and not be too specialist, at least in my case, as like someone who evaluates and tries to help these companies. There is quite a strong interest in NFT-Fi for sure. And I've been bullish on NFT-Fi for a very long time. In fact, one of the first things I used to pitch was NFT lending, and the idea that NFT lending would open up a new frontier for DeFi, which is under collateralized loans or providing a different type of collateral, especially for illiquid assets. So another project is recently been launched. They've just closed their angel round called Baton. Baton is like an NFT launchpad that allows for further financialization of NFTs. And sure, like profile pictures are the current main use case for NFTs, and they're what most people see the volume coming from. But the real question is, can you use the technology behind NFTs to tokenize more assets? And when you look at what ERC20s do as fungible tokens, the assumption is that there are fewer fungible things in the world than non-fungible things. Most of the world is very non-fungible. Most assets are quite unique, even tradable assets. If you can tokenize even just a small percentage of that and then put them into these different infrastructure tools, that infrastructure becomes a bedrock of the entire ecosystem and becomes incredibly valuable, like a Stripe. Stripe was based on the assumption that more and more people would use the internet to make payments. If you assume that more and more people will use NFTs to represent value on chain, then you want to be really deep into NFT infrastructure and NFT finance. Another cool side of things, of course, is DeSci, decentralized science. There's a project being built in HomeDAO at the moment called Retrox. They won ETH Amsterdam. They got the main prize there, and they've then carried on building that. They're building it actually as a public good. They turned down investment because they didn't want to monetize it. They wanted it to be purely public good focused, and it allows you to retroactively give grant funding. One of the problems at the moment for scientists or academics or researchers or any group really that relies on grant funding is that you get a commitment for a grant, but the lag time can be quite significant. Often when you're dealing with a bureaucracy, they could change their internal policy during the time you've been working on this and just retract the grant whenever they want. With Retrox, it's effectively an escrow that allows you to know with some degree of certainty that based on certain milestones, you'll receive the money that you were promised. This is being used, or at least it's being planned to be used specifically in the DeSci context for now, but it can be applied to all sorts of different domains, even government-funded projects. not just university focused. DeSci is something that lots of people are getting more and more interested in. And I think we're definitely helped by the fact that we're in Oxford, because there's a very strong scientific community here. Things like the COVID vaccine was started here, but also lots of AI research is going on here. Obviously, there's like Futtium, a far later stage. James is one of the founders of Futtium, and he actually had already raised the seed funding before he joined HomeDAO, which was a really, at least I think, a really big sign of faith in the project and in the value that we provide, or the value that you get from living in HomeDAO. The fact that he stayed at a football management game on chain. If you imagine Football Manager as it currently exists, you can put loads of time. I have some friends who spent ridiculous amounts of time playing this football management game and climbing the leagues and really growing their club out and employing these different tactics and strategies. And some of them are actually excellent strategists now. It gets to the point where perhaps 2,000 years ago, they would be leading an army rather than in a virtual world. But all of that time is effectively just spent on this game, which isn't even multiplayer and is not yielding any material returns either. So you don't have this sense of ownership of the club in the same way. What Futtium allows you to do is to actually own this institution that you're building and for you to benefit from its results. So let's say your club wins the league. Not only do you get the adrenaline rush of actually the conquest, but also you get rewards from the prize pool and your club becomes worth more. Your players improve and they become worth more. So they've created an entire community around this. They have more than 600 clubs, one of which I'm the proud owner of. We're called Marut Wanderers. We're fictional clubs because then you own all of the IP for it. And these clubs are owned by communities often. So groups of people will come together and chip in to buy a club and then create their own Twitter accounts for the club and then create Twitter accounts for the fictional city in which the club is based. So what they've done a really impressive job of, as well as obviously the tech and actually building the game, is really galvanizing their community. And this speaks to what outdoteth was mentioning before, which is the difference between building the product, but then also going to market and getting that user feedback and constantly iterating on it.
That's a great example because everybody seems to agree that gaming is one of the next billion users for the blockchain. And the early blockchain games have been created out of the crypto space and maybe are not that playable. While now, especially when you look at Korea, Japan, and probably China as well, with the gaming studios who are coming in and using blockchain just as a technology, but they have the experience and the expertise in creating captivating games. And that, I think, will be something I'm watching out here for in Japan for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really bullish on GameFi and the potential that it holds.
Back to the organizational question, you have this umbrella of the HomeDAO, you've got individual funders who own these projects and raise funds. But is there a co-op aspect to it where, because it happens under the HomeDAO umbrella, the DAO as a whole, the 20 people share whatever percentage of what comes out of these projects?
No, not at the moment. We're far more flexible and informal than that at the moment. We don't plan to extract in that way, or we didn't plan to extract in that way because it would be quite significant friction for someone to join. And what we really want is this flywheel of cool people join, build cool companies, attracts other cool people to join. That's really what HomeDAO is all about. To incentivize people materially and to align people materially, we do plan to have a venture DAO or a venture arm, which everyone in HomeDAO would have some stake in. So then it's not only that you're benefiting from the other person's relationship to help them, but your balance sheet is also benefiting. So yeah, the incubator element is quite clear. I think an incubator would probably be the wrong word because, again, it's not a formal program per se, but we do intend to start to allocate some capital towards projects in HomeDAO.
I can only imagine, given that the actual implementation isn't quite intense on time consuming, that with that group of people, you also generate more ideas than you're able to implement. And so if you actually, through the network, can maybe the ideas that you currently can't handle, basically find a team that takes it on and then fund them through the venture DAO, you're almost getting to a franchise model then.
Yeah, perhaps. We're very lucky as well to be working with the partners that we are working with. So, for example, WebN Group, the DeFi incubator that's part of the Brevin Howard digital family, they're always looking for that sort of thing. So we often give them ideas or we suggest potential things that they could look at, and then that can take a whole new life of its own, like we say.
Franchising, nothing against Oxford. It's a very nice place to live. And as you say, it's close to the university, so it's very intellectual and science-based. But there are some places around the globe that have better weather.
I don't know what you think about that, Out, but you quite enjoy the rain, don't you?
Yes, but a house in Portugal would be nice. So I just want to say, I think it was interesting you touched on the points where there may be more ideas than people who can execute on them. I think it's definitely the case that the main bottleneck right now is really just accruing the talent and getting more people to come in. It's like almost every day we have these discussions just among members where all these ideas are generated and all these new potential projects that can be built, but the main constraining factor is really just the talent to get it done. We're trying to get more people to join, expand the members that are coming in, and really just growing the network of HomeDAO in general.
Maybe two questions to round it out. One is looking at society as a whole and all the problems that we have. One can make an argument, and it's often being made, right, that the smart young people we have that can really move stuff, does it make sense from a societal perspective to work on crypto? Aren't there other, whatever, green technologies or so where you could add greater society value?
I don't know if crypto is the correct target there. If you look at the real sort of value extractors and the people who seem to be causing the most damage to society, or at least adding the least value, you would point to companies like Facebook or similar big tech organizations that don't actually seem to be working on groundbreaking sort of humanitarian elements anymore. There's no true ideological element behind increasing advertiser revenue or making your product more addictive to children in Zimbabwe. There's no actual benefit from expanding the market for Facebook, really, on like some degree of connectivity that we already have. Or for example, Snapchat. There are some ways that Snapchat has been described as an app for certain types of image sharing by adolescents. None of these things are particularly going to change the future of the human race. However, robust financial systems that the whole world can depend on and that allow us to transfer, represent, own value in a way that's fairer and more transparent, they're undoubtedly worth working on. And all of the different innovations that blockchain can bring will allow us to transition into a digital era with far fewer concerns around security, privacy, fragility, transparency, etc., etc. I would actually really advocate in favor of building in blockchain and building products on top of blockchain. In terms of the allocation of talent, though, this is a different question. And I actually think that this is entirely accurate. We don't have a proper system for allocating the top 1% or the top 0.1% of talent. I'm very much inspired by Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist, on this. He often questions why we talk so much about what the quote unquote lower classes or people who are less fortunate in society. It's obvious that their sort of choices or their opportunities aren't always optimal. But the real question we should be asking for society is, what is the outsized impact that can be made from the very, very most talented and most fortunate and the choices that they make? And really, the university system, or the system of going to university for a few years, racking up loads of debt, and then going on to a grad scheme that should hopefully bring you an early retirement, that doesn't seem to me to actually benefit society in any meaningful way, or even the individuals that go through it. So there are four main ways that people see university, and all of them are quite flawed. This is Thiel's matrix. One is an investment product, so it's effectively a commodity. Hopefully it increases your starting salary when you do get a job. Then one's an insurance product. It's the idea that we're in a very uncertain world, and just like owning a house, if you go to university, you'll be safe. You'll be able to protect yourself against the headwinds. If you do this, you're hedged. Then there's the consumption product. We don't really need to talk about that because no one in HomeDAO is probably going to see university as a consumption good, but it's like you get to go to party for 4 years and it's great, and you'll potentially meet a partner there. And then the final one would be, this is a zero-sum tournament where you go to win loads of badges and medals and you kind of distinguish yourself, but not really. All of those things are fundamentally flawed, and we think that the monastic life that university was originally based on, of like-minded people all on a mission together, all trying to pursue something that's almost transcendental or ascendant, is what we're trying to really achieve with HomeDAO. That's the real way to allocate talent, I think.
Fantastic answer. And clearly, as far as social is concerned, I don't know if it came from Thiel as well, but we wanted flying cars and all we got 120 character tweets, right? I think you could have said traditional finance has been a hugely value extracting industry as well. And obviously, I spent a long time in there. So maybe last question for you, and given that you are in this Oxford environment where also lots is going on with AI, I simply must ask the question of ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot and all these things. What is the future of a programmer generally, and then where will have this technology the greatest impact? Are you using it? Are you going to use it to become even more productive? Or is this simply going to take out the bottom half of the programmer where it's more like handcraft rather than the high performance that you guys are bringing to the road?
My own personal experience with using these tools is that they've massively boosted my productivity. I use Copilot every day and also ChatGPT 4 every day. And interfacing with the tools can really boost your output. So that's my own personal experience. My view on where it's going is really centered around composability. If you look at ChatGPT right now, it has a huge amount of power where you can just interface with it and it will give you a reasonable response. But the real power is in being able to interface with it and not have this one-dimensional interaction where you talk to it and it gives you some feedback, but to talk to it and to ask it to do some tasks. To say something like, I want to go and have a holiday in Portugal or something, and it will go and book the flights, it will book the hotel, it will book insurance travel and all of these things. And I think that world is really not quite far away. So you have things like plugins, which are in beta right now or will be released quite soon, which allows developers to create tools that plug into ChatGPT and then do the things that I'm saying. I think crypto ties into this quite heavily as well. So the trad institutions, for all the benefits which you've already said on the podcast so far, and that they've really refined the human judgment and arbitration process, they are really not very composable and they're very hard to integrate with and interface with programmatically. And that's true for both law, but also in particular with banks. It's very difficult to interface with banks and use the banking system programmatically to automatically send money around and initiate loans, open up leverage positions or something. This is very easy to do on blockchain in contrast to that. The natural progression, I think, is that with all of these plugins coming with ChatGPT and booking the flights or interfacing with many different services programmatically, the most natural thing is to then integrate with blockchain, which is highly programmable, it's highly composable, and it really naturally fits into this digitally native rails, being able to connect all these services together. That's the world which we'll go into. Maybe it's probably 3 or 5 years away, but it's definitely in the mid to short term.
Wonderful, gentlemen. I think this was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed this. Thanks very much for sharing your experience and perspective on these things. Really appreciate the conversation and all the best for the HomeDAO going forward.
Thanks. Yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks, Norbert. Great to chat.